potential changes to the CDM regulations. And fundamentally, the change to get rid of the CDM coordinator and replace the CDM coordinator with somebody called a principal designer. I've done a review of all the proposals that in the potential new regulations and compared them to what we've currently got, and to be perfectly honest, in summary, not totally impressed. But we'll deal with this one, and we'll see how we take it from there. Okay, fundamentally, why are we doing this? Well, and this is my opinion, it's purely politically driven. Professor Losted in his evaluations of health and safety law in this country came to the conclusion that the CDM regulations could do with a few tweaks here and there, but were fundamentally okay. But the approved code of practice could do with a good looking at. I think that was probably about right. But because the government didn't actually want that answer, they actually wanted, let's scrap everything and start again. They totally ignored what Professor Losted said, and basically turned around to the health and safety executive and said, okay, we want you to fundamentally, root and branch, have a look at the CDM regulations, and justify anything that isn't just a straight copy out from the directive. Under the strange thought process that that was actually going to reduce costs to industry. Well, the only thing I've got to say about that is the politicians have obviously not read the directive. Okay. There's been a number of evaluations since then, but I think generally 2007 was regarded as better than 1994. It certainly seemed to work better, like a lot of the inconsistencies have been taken out. Still scope for effectiveness, particularly with small construction sites and businesses, and certainly the statistics do bear that sort of thing out, that the big jobs are not the ones that we actually kill people on. It's the small ones. The simple ones that nobody does a lot of planning about because it's simple and it's small, so let's get on and do it. The duty holders producing bureaucratic systems, yeah, there's still an extent to this. Documentation produced for the sake of it, rather than actually having things that are useful. And what we keep on telling people, you know, these things like pre-construction information, construction phase plans, health and safety files, the criteria for whether something is included is, will it be useful? If it will, stick it in. If it won't, don't bother. Although we still get documents that thick out from in construction projects, and I'm sure you found them, including things like specifications. And I would just like to point out to you the likelihood of anybody reading anything is inversely proportional to its thickness. So thin is good. Costly competence assurance systems, a disproportionate effect on small contractors. Yeah, okay, I can see that. I've done it from both sides. Done the send out the questionnaires and evaluated the returns, and also get these questionnaires on a fairly regular basis and have to respond to them. So the agency is saying, like, well, let's get rid of that, let's simplify the system, and I tend to agree with that. But then they said we've got to comply with the PAS, which is basically exactly the same as what we've got now. Okay, individual competence card schemes that deliver little or no benefits. That's probably the administration of them rather than anything else. Things like the CSCS card, etc. It could be administered a little bit better. I mean, the entire idea of the card in the first place was a good idea. I think maybe we missed some of the point of it as we've gone through time. But the idea is to actually tell the management on the site the competence of the people who are actually coming on the site, rather than whether an engineer is good enough as a visitor. Okay, so why have we got these proposals? Well, larger organisations, according to this, has come to the Health and Safety Executive, were less motivated by regulation than by best practice and continuous improvements. Some, yes, but not all. There's a two-tier system with smaller sites responsible for a much greater percentage of serious and fatal accidents than the larger sites. Yeah, can't argue that, that's absolutely right. But then I'm not sure if the current proposals will actually do anything about that. Late appointment of the CDM coordinator was a serious issue. But then so was limited effectiveness of the CDM coordinator. Well, probably because they were appointed late. And information not being provided. That was also could be linked to the fact that the CDM coordinator was not appointed at the right time. I've not mean to say that some CDM coordinators were not doing their jobs very well, because some weren't. Fully accept that. But probably a lot of the problems was basically due to late appointment. Designers producing unnecessary paperwork. Yeah, I'm sure most of you have come across these design risk assessment things. Normally quite thick, and tells us basically what the designer hasn't done, rather than what the designer has actually done. And tell us about the things that are totally obvious. I had a designer's risk assessment that told me that because we had water around, that there was this problem about Weil's disease. Yeah, well, I knew that. And what could the designer have done about it anyway? Get rid of all the water. Still potentially get rats. Yeah. Okay, the approved code of practice, too long, not well suited to small businesses. Yeah, I think we'd all tend to agree that the approved code of practice was a bit long and a little bit complex and could be simplified. So I think we'll all go along with that. And of course, the temporary or mobile construction sites directive had not been fully implemented in Great Britain. Primarily, that the domestic client didn't have any duties, and that we weren't applying the full requirements of the directive on the smaller projects. So they've attempted to address those issues as well. So what are the intentions of the proposals? Well, supposed to come up, yeah, address the shortcomings of the current regulations, provide a framework that's better suited to the small businesses and small projects, thus increasing compliance and improvement of health and safety. Yeah, okay. Align the regulations more closely with the directive. So far as the domestic client is concerned, probably don't have any choice about that. The cost of the implementation. According to the HSE's consultation document, getting rid of the CDM coordinator will reduce construction costs by approximately £30 million. Now, I do know that the Association for Project Safety have now put in a request to the HSE under Freedom of Information to find out where they got this 30 million from. I understand, and it's just word of mouth so far, that somebody thought it was a nice figure. But there is absolutely no basis to that value. In any case, you know, if CDM-C's gone, then somebody's got to do it. And I'm sure this is not going to be a charitable thing, that they might actually want to be paid. So, not totally convinced that's the case. Smaller projects will now come into triggering appointments, although costs should be minimal. All the regulations, according to the proposals, will apply to any project that has more than one contractor involved. So any project with more than one contractor has to have an appointed principal designer and principal contractor and a construction phase plan. They're reducing costs. Smaller projects will also require the construction phase plan, as I just said, although they say this should be low cost. Yeah, okay. Smaller projects will also require a health and safety file to be produced, and this should also be low cost. Although after saying that, I think it's absolutely right, both of those, that we should have a construction phase plan on all projects, because basically it's a management system for the job. And we should have a health and safety file for all projects, because basically it's as-built and operational and maintenance information, which I would suggest we need anyway. So those last two things I would tend to agree with. Not necessarily the cost bit. Okay, so project cost, they say lower cost due to no CDM-C, don't agree with it. Higher cost for designer due to pre-construction information and health and safety calculation on wider range of projects. So we've got to have them on basically all projects now, and that responsibility, the provision of the information, the pre-construction information and the preparation of the health and safety file will be in the principal designer's responsibility. Otherwise known as the lead designer or the architect. I think they might want to be paid to do this. Higher cost for contractor, but for production and construction phase plan on a wider range of projects. They've got the builder who's going to go around to the domestic clients to stick a new bathroom in will have to produce a construction phase plan. Do you think that will actually happen? Might be a few more prosecutions, but then again, this application to the domestic client, who's going to enforce it? Do we think the health and safety executive has got enough people in-house to actually enforce the CDM regulations on domestic client work? They can't even enforce it on commercial work. Never mind the domestic client work. So, okay, there may be additional costs, but fundamentally, there's not going to be that many additional costs, because fundamentally, they won't do it. Possible cost implications for domestic clients due to expansion of the scope of regulations. Although they've been quite clever, domestic client works the client's duties will automatically be undertaken by whoever was the first designer or contractor working for them. However, if there's more than one contractor on the project, the domestic client, Mrs. Jones, round the corner, will have to formally appoint the principal designer and principal contractor working on the project. This is, of course, if anybody tells them. The client may need additional advice and assistance, because although they've actually proposing to get rid of the CDM coordinator and replace him with the project, this principal designer, the designer's element of the CDM coordinator is being transferred to the principal designer. The advice and assistance part of the CDM coordinator's duties disappears. Nobody will be required to give advice and assistance to the client. And given that the client's responsibilities appear to have been increased by the new regulations, and I mean commercial clients here, due to the fact that at the moment the client only has to ensure effective management of the project. Under the new regulations, or the proposed regulations, the client has to manage health and safety on the project. I'm suggesting that maybe the client might need a bit of assistance. Okay, I believe, from a commercial perspective, I act as a CDM coordinator, and you might think, well, I'm arguing against getting rid of the CDM coordinator because of the commercial potential downside to my organisation on the back of that? I actually don't think there will be. Because I don't think that the design organisations are going to want to do this. So they're going to probably hire people who are currently acting as CDM coordinators to actually do the function for them. And because there's nobody with criminal liability to actually advise and assist the client, I think I might be actually hired by the client to be a health and safety advisor for them on the project. So whereas at the moment I get a single contractor CDM coordinator on a project, I could potentially get 2 contracts on a single project, one from the lead designer and one from the client. Is this going to change anything? Other than I might make some more money. I think that's a really good idea. Okay. They're also proposing to get rid of the approved code of practice and replace it by some guidance. The idea of this is that smaller contractors will understand and therefore have an increase in compliance. Most people don't read guidance. Are the smaller contractor going to read this document because it's guidance? Or they're just going to ignore it anyway? I believe most people take more notice of an approved code of practice than they do guidance. It does have this special legal status, and therefore people take more notice of it. Guidance is guidance. Follow it or not, as you see fit. I believe this may cause less compliance with the regulations by getting rid of the approved code of practice. The guidance, they're saying, is actually aimed at specific industry subsectors and different types of construction projects. We've yet to see any of this. The consultative document has only been the regulations. We've yet to see any of this proposed guidance. We don't even have a list of what it could potentially be. Guidance will have no legal standing, as I've just said, so I think maybe it's probably going to be ignored. I mean, I'll ask you, how many of you actually read the current guidance for the CDM regulations? Occasionally. Let's compare it to how many have actually read most of the approved code of practice from time to time. I rest my point. Okay, will the changes be effective? Well, designers probably do understand health and safety general requirements on them, but do they fully understand the various standards to be applied that should be brought to the table currently by the CDM coordinator? But basically, I think the CDM coordinator makes sure that the designers actually are thinking about the health and safety stuff and asking silly questions of the designer. If the designer and the principal designer are one and the same, will they actually do this? The other concern I have about this is clients may actually expect the lead designer to actually perform the function of the principal designer without being paid for doing it. And my guess is, if somebody isn't being paid to do something, they may not do it. The other slight concern, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, professional indemnity insurance for designers is normally quite restricted or prescriptive as to what they can actually do, got to do designs to standards and all these sorts of things. I'm just wondering whether the insurance industry has actually thought about whether they'll actually insure some of these design consultancies and architects to act as the principal designer. Because there will be criminal liability associated with it. I'm not sure if anybody from the health and safety executive has actually asked the insurance industry about this. Loss of an independent set of eyes looking at the project overall. I mean, the other question is, could I have a principal designer? Who are they going to be? Is it going to be the architect? Is it going to be the civils engineer? Is it going to be the process engineer? Or the mechanical engineer? Or the electrical engineer? Who's actually going to be the principal designer? And there could still be designers contracted directly by the client. Which one is going to be the principal designer? We'd have enough problems trying to figure out who's the principal contractor. Lots of somebody legally tasked to provide advice and assistance to the client. So the client's got more responsibilities and we're taking their advisor away. How will the designer ensure inclusion of information in the health and safety file if they're no longer on the project? The client quite often likes to sort of cease contractual terms with the designer as soon as the design's finished. But the health and safety file is put at the end of the job. So that probably means the client will have to have some arrangement to keep the designer on board until the delivery of the health and safety file, which I would suggest is probably a good idea anyway, but there may be some cost associated with that. Okay, so that's all basically I've got to say about this change from the CDM coordinator to the principal designer. I think you can get a feeling from what I've been saying that I'm not totally impressed with the idea. The other concern that I have for the industry, as far as cost is concerned, is all standard models and forms of contract that we currently have are based around having a CDM coordinator. And that then means that all these standard models and contracts will need to be changed. And that may cost a bit of money. And there are no transitional provisions proposed for the new regulations. So if they come in on the 5th of April, or 6th of April, sorry, next year, on the 5th of April we'll have a CDM coordinator on the project, and on the 6th of April we'll have a principal designer. And that's going to work, isn't it? Okay, so I really believe that these proposals have not been properly thought through. The HSE say that they have actually spoken at length with industry. I'd like to know who. And it appears that whenever anybody says to them that this isn't good, they just totally ignore it. Can I suggest to you that you all need to respond to this consultation document? My hope is that this will be the biggest return on a consultation process ever, and hopefully it will then take them about 10 years to respond to it, and I can be retired before they finish. But other than that, I'll leave it to you.